Diego Maradona. His story in football didn't end with a slow decline on the pitch. Instead, it came with sudden, sharp blows. Back in March of 1991, the Italian league dropped the hammer, announcing Maradona was banned for testing positive for hard drugs while playing for Napoli. This wasn't your average suspension because he got hit with a 15-month ban. That meant no matches, no training, no chance to step onto the field until the summer of 1992. But this wasn't the first time Maradona was having issues in the beautiful game. Just a few years earlier, he had faced heavy criticism for his lifestyle and rumoured drug use. At the time of the ban, Maradona was still under contract with Napoli, the club where he had become a legend by winning 2 Serie A titles. But his career was already messy off the field. He was accused of links to the mafia, skipped training sessions, and often clashed with the media. Then came the drug test, and everything collapsed. The ban was global, meaning he couldn't play for Argentina either. For a player who had carried his nation to the 1986 World Cup trophy, it was a massive fall. But the story didn't stop there. Just 3 years later, at the 1994 World Cup in the United States, Maradona returned to the world stage at age 33. Argentina looked sharp and even scored a rocket goal against Greece. But then, out of nowhere, FIFA announced he had tested positive again, this time for ephedrine, a banned stimulant. A positive test for banned stimulants can lead to automatic dismissal, and that's exactly what happened here. The punishment was immediate. Maradona was expelled from the tournament and banned for 15 months. That image of him being escorted off the field by a nurse after his final World Cup game became iconic, but for all the wrong reasons. Many Maradona fans felt sympathy, calling him a victim of his own fame. Others saw it as proof of long-standing rumours of abuse. Either way, the world was stunned. His career after the ban took a major hit. The bans cost him millions in contracts and endorsements, and more importantly, destroyed what could have been an even greater career peak. Maradona admitted later in interviews that he had made mistakes, though he always denied being a hardcore addict in the way the media portrayed him. Still, football takes doping seriously, and FIFA doesn't hand out free passes. The bans defined his later career, and while he returned briefly to club football, he was never the same. Even as one of the greatest footballers of all time, his chances of fully redeeming his career after those suspensions reduced after each session. Joey Barton. This was a ban that hit like a lightning strike, and for all the right reasons. Back in April 2017, the FA announced that Barton was guilty of breaching football's strict betting rules. The punishment was heavy, and he was slapped with an 18-month suspension from all football activities. At 34 years old, it was effectively a career ender. The investigation revealed Barton had placed over 1,260 bets on matches between 2006 and 2016, including games where he played. That's not exactly the blueprint for a long run in the Premier League. The FA's case against him was detailed. In some instances, Barton even placed bets on his own team to lose. While there was no evidence he tried to fix matches or influence results, the rules are simple. Players cannot gamble on football at all. Barton admitted he had a gambling addiction, saying it was something he had struggled with for years. But the FA was not about to even consider that as an excuse. The scale of his betting was so huge that a strong message had to be sent. On top of the ban, Barton was fined £30,000. For a player who had just returned to Burnley and hoped to finish his career on a high, the timing couldn't have been worse. Public reaction to the ban was explosive. Some fans backed him, saying betting culture is everywhere in football, from shirt sponsors to stadium ads. But many fans sided with the FA, pointing out that rules are rules, and Barton knew what he was doing. Fellow players mostly stayed quiet, but insiders noted that his case was the most serious gambling scandal in English football for decades. Barton himself didn't deny it. He released a statement calling the punishment harsh but fair, explaining that betting had been part of his life since his teens. He also admitted that gambling had cost him not just money, but relationships. Now, it had cost him his playing career. The FA's rules on betting are as clear as FIFA's stance on doping or match fixing. They don't hand out second chances easily. Once the 18 months were up, Barton was free to play again. But he never did. At that point, his career was over. Instead, he turned to punditry and later management, trying to rebuild his image away from the pitch. The damage done to his career was deep, and his legacy as a tough-tackling midfielder was blown away by his gambling addiction. All of this came from years of small slips, hundreds of wagers, and a habit that led to one of the most high-profile bans English football had ever seen. Adrian Mutu. When the FA banned him in October of 2004, the wording was clear: dismissed and disqualified. That meant he wasn't coming back anytime soon. He was out for at least 7 months, and nobody knew what came next. The violation? A positive test for hard drugs. The FA confirmed it after he failed a random drug test while at Chelsea. This was not the kind of slap on the wrist you get for a harsh tackle or a red card. This was a career-stopping moment. At the time, Mutu was one of Chelsea's big signings. He joined the club from Parma just the year before and started strong, scoring early goals under Claudio Ranieri. But by 2004, things were falling apart. Jose Mourinho had arrived and Mutu had lost his place. When the test result came back, Chelsea terminated his contract immediately. That meant no wages, no club, and no chance of a comeback until the suspension was lifted. The real damage went beyond the ban. Chelsea later sued him for breach of contract, and the courts ordered him to pay €17 million in compensation. Mutu fought the decision for years, but he lost the case and had to pay up. While he didn't do a big apology tour or sit-down interviews at the time, he later admitted to his mistake. He spent the rest of the ban keeping quiet, focusing on rebuilding himself. Then fast forward to 2005. After serving his ban, he got a second chance in Italy with Juventus, then Fiorentina, and even managed to revive parts of his career. He scored goals, showed flashes of the old talent, and earned call-ups for Romania, but the shadow of the ban never really left him. As of 2025, Mutu is remembered as one of football's most talented but troubled strikers. He played well into his 30s, scoring for club and country, but never truly escaped the stigma of that 2004 suspension. His story stands out for how sudden it was. No long decline, no build-up, just a failed test, a swift exit, and a career that could never quite return to what it promised to be. Paul Pogba. Before he could even lace up his boots again after 2022, football had already turned its back on him. Back in September of 2023, just as Juventus were trying to bring him back into the field, Pogba got hit with a provisional suspension for testing positive for testosterone. This wasn't some minor watch yourself warning. It sidelined him indefinitely while the investigation played out. Instead of a comeback story in Turin, Pogba spent months on the bench waiting for answers. Fast forward to February of 2024 and the verdict dropped. 4 years. That's how long Pogba was banned from football for a doping violation. His defense argued that there was contamination, maybe supplements gone wrong, but the authorities weren't buying it. So instead of bossing midfields in Serie A, he was stuck fighting appeals. His return was pushed all the way to 2027, when he'd be 33. And that was strike 2, in a way. Strike 1 had been his endless injuries: knees, hamstrings, muscle pulls, you name it. Between 2019 and 2023, Pogba's minutes kept shrinking. Then came the suspension, and with it, the collapse of whatever was left of his prime. At Juventus, he barely played after re-signing. For France, he missed the 2022 World Cup, watching from home as his teammates reached the final. The fallout was brutal. Sponsorships faded and media coverage turned harsh. Fans stood by him, saying he was unlucky, that it wasn't deliberate. Commentators claimed his career had been sliding for years, and this was the final nail. Financially, the damage was huge. He lost wages, endorsements, and maybe his spot in history as one of France's best midfielders. Pogba's lawyers appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, and in October 2024, the ban was cut down from 4 years to just 18 months. This means his ban officially ended in March 2025, making him eligible to play again. In June 2025, he finally returned to football, signing for Ligue 1 side AS Monaco on a 2-year deal. All through the ban, Pogba tried to stay positive, training, posting workout clips, and even talking about an eventual return. But it's hard to see how he bridges all those lost years in such a demanding sport. He had it all: power, flair, trophies, and a World Cup trophy. But what nearly crushed it all was timing, injuries, and one test result that changed everything. Paolo Rossi. Italian football tossed him out in March of 1980, calling it a suspension for his role in the infamous Tottenero betting scandal. It wasn't your standard slap-on-the-wrist ban. This was a full-on exile that first stretched to 3 years. The violation? Match-fixing, or at least being linked to it. Rossi always denied taking part, saying he was innocent, but the authorities didn't buy it at the time. That's how the system worked: tight-lipped, firm, and no mercy. At the time, Rossi was 23 and already one of Italy's brightest young strikers. He just lit up the 1978 World Cup and was supposed to be the centerpiece of the national team heading into the 1980s. Instead, the ban shut the door. He missed 2 full seasons and the 1980 European Championship when Italy hosted. His career could have ended right there. Then came the climb back. Rossi's ban was reduced from 3 years to 2, meaning he could return just in time for the 1982 World Cup. He was rusty, sure, but Enzo Bearzot took the gamble and called him up anyway. At first, it looked like a mistake. Rossi was quiet in the group stage, no goals, no fireworks. But then the wheels started turning. Against Brazil, he exploded with a hat-trick in one of the most famous matches in World Cup history. He didn't stop there and scored twice against Poland in the semi-final, then once more in the final against West Germany. Italy lifted the trophy and Rossi won the Golden Boot and the Golden Ball. He had gone from ban to World Cup hero in the space of months. Talk about a redemption arc. After that, he became a legend. He played for Juventus, Milan and Verona, adding Serie A titles, a European Cup and more goals to his name. His career ended in 1987 with 48 caps for Italy and 20 international goals. Post-retirement, he stayed close to football, working as a pundit and sharing his story. Rossi never escaped the shadow of the scandal completely. But it didn't matter in the end. What mattered was the comeback. He beat the odds. No legal trouble, no lifetime mark, just a 2-year pause and a whole lot of resolve. For a guy who was once completely tossed out of the game, finishing as a World Cup hero and one of Italy's icons was a real comeback. Robinho. In November of 2017, football found itself in the middle of a firestorm. An Italian court convicted Robinho, then a former AC Milan striker, of participating in an extreme act of group sexual assault against a woman in a Milan nightclub back in 2013. Yes, that actually happened. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Robinho, of course, denied it, but the ruling was upheld not once, not twice, but 3 separate times by higher courts. By January of 2022, Italy's Supreme Court confirmed the sentence as final. There was no more appeal. Now here's where it gets messy. Italy wanted him extradited, but Brazil's constitution doesn't allow citizens to be sent abroad to serve prison sentences. So instead, Italy pushed for him to serve the sentence at home in Brazil. As of 2023, Brazil's Supreme Court approved that request, which means unless something changes, Robinho will serve those 9 years in a Brazilian prison. His football career was already done by then. In October 2020, Santos FC announced he was coming back, almost like a farewell tour. The backlash was instant. Sponsors threatened to walk, fans protested, and in less than 6 days, the contract was torn up. Robinho never played another professional game again. Unlike bans for doping or betting, there's no reinstatement process here. This wasn't about football rules. This was about a criminal conviction that followed him everywhere. And when courts in 3 different stages all confirmed it, the damage was permanent. Now, let's not pretend Robinho didn't have a good career run. He came through at Santos, starred at Real Madrid, went to Manchester City for £32 million, then Milan, then China. The wages piled up, but when the conviction hit, his reputation collapsed. Clubs cut ties, broadcasters stopped calling his name, players, pundits, journalists, and fans across the world called him out. Women's rights groups pressured clubs not to touch him. Even Santos, the club that raised him, had to publicly distance themselves. The story followed him every step of the way, from Brazil to Turkey to back home again. Since then, Robinho's kept a low profile. No coaching gigs, no media roles, no return to football. As of 2025, he's 41 years old, and with a 9-year sentence hanging over him, it's safe to say his football chapter is closed. For good. Mason Greenwood. Back in January of 2022, football shut the door on a 20-year-old phenom before he ever had the chance to reach his peak. He had just broken into Manchester United's first team, scoring goals with both feet when his name got dragged into one of the biggest scandals in English football. Greenwood was arrested in January 2022 after audio recordings and photos were posted online, accusing him of assault and controlling behaviour. But he was not convicted, not sentenced, nothing. Yet because the evidence went viral, the club and the Premier League treated him like a full-blown criminal. United suspended him immediately, sponsors pulled out, and even video game companies deleted him from their titles. There was no trial yet, no verdict, but the damage was already done. For over a year, Greenwood sat on the outside looking in while his case went through the courts. By February 2023, all charges were dropped. The Crown Prosecution Service said key witnesses had withdrawn, and new evidence came to light. Greenwood was technically free to play, but the stain remained. While United ran an internal investigation and debated his return, the public split into furious camps, with many questioning his innocence. In August of 2023, the club announced he would not be coming back. Instead, he went out on loan to Getafe in Spain. From 20 to 2022, those crucial years for a rising star, Greenwood's career was stuck in a pit. The accusation caused him to miss nearly 600 days of football. When he finally stepped back on the pitch in La Liga, he showed flashes of his old self. Goals, assists, pace, the talent was still there, but the controversy followed him everywhere. Away fans booed and media coverage never let go of the past. Even in Spain, the debate continued. Should he even be allowed to play? The reason for the exile? Pure scandal fallout. Greenwood was still a young player, and the scandal had made headline news. That was enough for the club in a #MeToo era where even whispers of abuse sent leagues into panic mode. Manchester United did not need proof, just fear. As of 2025, Greenwood is still rebuilding his career, linked with moves back to bigger clubs. But his case still stands as one of the most controversial cases in English football. No convictions, no jail time, just a young player penalised for an image crisis that clubs and leagues wanted no part of. Luis Suarez. His football career basically came with a ticking clock from day one. Signed by Groningen as a teenager, then Ajax, by the time he hit Liverpool, expectations were sky high. But his time on the pitch was almost as famous for the bans as it was for the goals. In 2010, while at Ajax, Suarez hit Othman Bakal during a league match. The Dutch FA slapped him with a 7-game suspension. That was strike one. And yeah, 7 games doesn't end a career, but it was the giant red flag waving in everyone's face. He was already Ajax's captain, their star man, and suddenly he was in the headlines for cannibal jokes. Not ideal. Fast forward to 2011 at Liverpool, and Suarez was banned for 8 games after racially abusing Patrice Evra during a Premier League match. Strike 2. The FA made their case, the details were public, and his reputation was taking hits. He was scoring goals, but the controversies were starting to pile higher than his stat sheets. Then came the hammer. In a 2013 match against Chelsea, Suarez hit Branislav Ivanovic. Another ban. 10 games this time, and just when it seemed like he'd learned his lesson, the 2014 World Cup rolled around. Playing for Uruguay against Italy, Suarez hit Giorgio Chiellini on the shoulder. FIFA banned him for 4 months from all football-related activity. That was strike 3, and the world saw him as the guy who couldn't stop biting defenders. The bans cost him millions in wages, endorsements, and reputation. Sponsors like Adidas and 888 Poker dropped him, and the jokes followed him everywhere. Still, Suarez didn't fade away. After serving his suspension, he joined Barcelona and won it all: La Liga, Champions League, and Copa del Rey. Over 500 career goals later, he's remembered as both a legend and one of football's wildest cautionary tales. Roberto Rojas. Back in 1989, FIFA booted out a goalkeeper before he ever had the chance to finish his career in glory. Rojas was 31, captain of Chile, and in the middle of the World Cup qualifiers when his name got dragged into one of the most infamous scandals the game has ever seen. Chile was playing Brazil at the Maracanã, and they needed a win to stay alive. Midway through the match, a flare was launched from the stands, landing near Rojas. Moments later, he collapsed on the pitch with his face covered in blood. Cameras caught the chaos. Teammates rushed to shield him, and the Chilean team walked off in protest. It looks like a tragedy, but it wasn't. Days later, FIFA investigated. The footage didn't add up, and eyewitnesses had questions. Then came the truth. The flare never touched him, meaning the blood was staged. Rojas had hidden a razor in his glove, cut himself, and faked the whole thing. The idea was to get Brazil punished, the match annulled, and Chile handed the win. Instead, FIFA dropped the hammer. Rojas was banned for life. No hearing to plead for leniency, no appeal strong enough to matter. He was just exiled from the sport, indefinitely. Chile was also barred from the 1994 World Cup qualifiers, and Rojas became the face of disgrace. For over a decade, he lived in the shadows, coaching in Brazil under the radar, but never officially recognized. Finally, in 2001, FIFA lifted the ban, long after his playing career was gone. By then, redemption was symbolic, not practical. The reason for the ban was simple: deliberate deception on the biggest stage. No accident, no mistake, just a premeditated act that embarrassed football worldwide. Rojas passed away in 2022 at 65, remembered not for the saves he made, but for the scandal that ended his career in one cut. George Owino Audi. His name might not sound like that of a World Cup legend, but he was forever marked in FIFA history for a very different reason. Lifetime bans tied to one of football's ugliest stains: match manipulation. In 2019, FIFA's Ethics Committee dropped the hammer after a years-long investigation. At the center of it all were attempts by organized syndicates to influence international fixtures, particularly World Cup and African Cup of Nations qualifiers. Audi was one of the 3 players from different countries who became examples of how deep the football corruption had spread. George Owino Audi, a Kenyan defender, was one of the key figures. According to FIFA documents, he exchanged messages with notorious match fixer Wilson Raj Perumal, discussing everything from planned yellow cards to final scores. He denied deliberately throwing games, but the evidence was enough. He was sentenced to a 10-year ban from all football activities and a fine of 15,000 Swiss francs. The reason for the lesser ban was that the FIFA investigation found him guilty of failing to disclose an attempt to influence the outcome of a match, which is a less severe violation than actively manipulating a match result. Audi never returned to football in any official role. The message was clear. For FIFA, match fixing is the ultimate red line. Forget drugs, forget discipline issues, gambling on results meant permanent exile. No reinstatements, no comebacks, just careers erased in one ruling. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out the channel for more incredible videos just like this one.